All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to our Mountain Housing Council meeting. We have a full agenda today, and so we're going to just keep this rolling. Christina, I'm wondering if you're going to show the slideshow, and we can start with our welcome and a very important introduction, and then we'll walk through the agenda and you'll really know what's going on here today. So thank you for joining us. Thank you for setting aside time on your busy Friday morning, especially when we can enjoy some sunshine before the snow. And I'm excited for today's agenda because not only is the content rich and important and impactful, but all the right people have come to join us today, and it's all the work that you guys are doing. So just to give you context, Mountain Housing Council is a part of the Tahoe Truckee Community Foundation. Next slide. And many of you know us for our scholarships and our grant making, but many of you also know us for some of our initiative-based work, including our Forest Futures, our family strengthening work that is done through the Community Collaborative Program. We have stepped up this last year, like so many of y'all, and helped during the COVID-19 emergency response. It's a big part of this last year. And we're happy to announce that one of our first impact investments, along with the Martis Fund, in the Truckee Artist Lofts are getting built. And so we're now excited to claim that as an aspect of what we do. Next slide. So Mountain Housing Council is made up of many of the institutions that make up this region. As we know, our region that shares the same school district and hospital district, we share the same employees and students. These organizations have all committed to looking at housing at a regional level. And we're so grateful to have you. And we're also grateful to welcome Visit Truckee Tahoe as our newest partner. Next slide, please. And as you recall, we are focused on housing for our local workforce. And it is under a definition that we came up with together, achievable local housing. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this later in the agenda, but we are focused not only on our lowest income earners, but we also are focused on housing solutions for our working middle class. Okay, so this is the big news today. If you haven't met Tara, I'm excited to introduce Tara Zuardo, our newest team member who has accepted the position of project director. Tara's originally from California, but she went to school and ended up working in Washington, D.C. the last 10 years. And we're excited to welcome her back to California and Truckee. And she has been on the job now for about 2 months. And so many of you have probably met her, but if you haven't, I'd like to encourage you to connect with her. And so it is my pleasure to hand this meeting over to Tara, who will be facilitating. And as usual, Christina, our Mountain Housing Council coordinator, will be behind the scenes running the slides and keeping us all on point and coordinated. So with that, let me hand it over to Tara.
Thank you, Stacy. Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. And I've really enjoyed working with those of you I've been able to connect with and work with. And for those I haven't had a chance yet to, I'm really looking forward to. I hope we get a chance to connect really soon. It's been a very quick learning curve here. And I'm just so excited to be working with all of these wonderful people and organizations. So thank you for your warm welcome. As we're going to hear more about today, this phase of Mountain Housing Council is really about moving from the important work that partners and shareholders and organizations have been doing over the last almost 3 years to kind of build strategy and important collaborations and working groups and kind of move more into community engagement and really getting out to the community and reaching them in ways that they need, getting them the help that they need in really creative efforts, and providing the kind of particular kind of housing solutions that our region really needs desperately right now, and is obviously getting a lot of focus and attention for. This is going to include, common sense steps that'll help kind of drive the right kind of housing, sustainable housing, legislative engagement, tools for those directly involved in coming up with housing solutions and developing housing, solutions for much needed supportive housing for really a variety of income levels, as you can see with the Achievable Local Housing Bridge, and also exploring employer-led housing solutions. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and just give you a little bit of a background on our new partner. I know all of you probably know who they are, but just in case you don't, they are a 501c6 that focuses on sustainable tourism in Truckee. So welcome, visit Truckee Tahoe. And next, we're gonna really launch into community storytelling. Our first speaker is Blake Tresson with Truckee Sanitary District. This is going to speak a little bit about Truckee Sanitary District's consideration of a revised connection fee and how this is directly linked with housing solutions. As all of you know, Mountain Housing Council about 4 years ago adopted impact fee assessments and produced reports describing in detail how they affect housing. So this is a really important and interesting presentation. So with that, Blake, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Tara. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to share a slideshow outlining a process the Truckee Sanitary District has gone through over the last several months. I know that several of you maybe sat through this slideshow. It was given to the Tahoe Regional Planning Association a few weeks ago. Tara, do I have the ability to share screen?
Yeah, Christina's working on that. Yeah.
Yep, you have the
So with
ability,
that,
Blake.
can everybody see this slide?
Yep.
Great. Okay, so we are setting our residential sewer connection fees is sort of the story. Just background, TSD is the public agency responsible for wastewater collection in the greater Truckee area. You can see our service area in the map down at the bottom. We've been around since 1906, served the 16,000 customers. Area's seen a lot of growth, averaging about 2% per year. Our daily operating expenditures are funded through operating revenues through an annual user fee and a portion of the property taxes. But this is really a story about our connection fee, and that's a connection fee is so growth pays for growth. It's for capacity expanding capital projects are funded through these connection fees. It's a one-time charge at the time of connection, and it's put into a fund that is specifically restricted for capacity-related infrastructure projects. Currently, we charge a flat rate of $750 per equivalent dwelling unit. The vast majority of our customers are residences, single-family residences, and this $750 fee that was established in 1983, almost 40 years ago now, basically did not make any distinction on what kind of residential unit, whether it was a 1,000 square foot unit or a 6,000 square foot unit. Everybody paid the same amount. And so we reviewed, first we went through a hydraulic model to look at the capacity of our collection system back in 2019, and found that there are a number of parts of our collection system that would need to be expanded to accommodate future build out of our community, rough estimated at approximately $20 million in infrastructure costs. And the way the connection fee works is we need to recoup that money through the future roughly 12,000 potential equivalent dwelling units that could be connected at build out. In 2020, we retained a consultant kind of to assess adequacy of our current connection fee, and their recommendation was that $750 that's been around for almost 40 years needed to be increased to roughly $1,440 per equivalent dwelling unit. Just to put that into context, the other 4 public agencies that also provide sewer collection services in our area and discharge to TTSA's treatment plant, our Tahoe City, currently has a flat rate of $1,000 per EDU. North Tahoe's rate is a variable rate, but averages over 5,000. Olympic Valley, or it used to be Squaw, over 5,000, and that's a flat rate. And Alpine Springs County Water District has a combined water and sewer rate over 12,000. So we're looking at going up to 1440, which is still in the spectrum of other folks. Relatively light, but it's what we need to ensure that growth pays for growth in our system, and that we're not charging our existing customers for the need to expand the system. So we have 2 different customer classes, commercial and residential. Commercial classes are charged based on typically number of kind of types of fixtures, restaurant seats or plumbing units. And the recommendation was to keep our sort of flow ratio. You know, a restaurant seat is equivalent to 7% of an EDU. And so we were going to keep that ratio the same. But really for the relevance of this discussion, I want to talk about our residential rates. So again, we looked at 3 options that the consultant and staff presented to our board. One option was to continue the historic use of a flat rate of $1,440 per unit. Our board likes to say a house is a house is a house. Option 2 was to go to a tiered rate where we made a distinction between single family units that would be charged at $1,440 and multifamily units would be charged a fraction of that. And then option 3 was a scalable rate, really based on the size of the unit. We tried to be as transparent as possible in this process, reached out to Mountain Housing Council, CAT, some of the larger developers in the area, and kept them informed of the board meetings and the consultants' work and the report that was coming forward, and received comments from a lot of folks in the process. The scalable rate has some interesting elements. You really need to find the nexus between the size of the structure and the peak flow. What is that relationship? You know, it's complicated in our area by occupancy patterns since we're such a second home community. You know, purely scalable probably isn't an equitable one where, you know, a 6,000 square foot home, for instance, doesn't really produce 6 times of what a 1,000 square foot unit would produce. And so we came up with this concept of instead of being purely scalable and the connection fee being a direct relationship of the square footage, some base fee plus a scalable portion. This is a chart. I went onto the county's assessor information and plotted the size, all the homes, residential units we currently have in our system, and plotted size of home by the combination of bedrooms and bathrooms. And so there's clearly a relationship as homes get larger. There's more bedrooms, more bathrooms, and bedrooms and bathrooms can result in more flow out of the home. So it seemed reasonable that there should be some potential for a higher peak flow from a larger home. And just for your information, the average size residential unit is 2,000 square feet. So you end up with this spectrum. This really plots, you know, right here where all these lines cross is that 2,000 square foot residential unit that would be a connection fee of $1,440. The brown line represents basically your flat fee. So it says as the homes increase in size, there's no change in the connection fee. It's always $1,440. The steepest slope line, the blue line, represents a purely scalable one where there is no base rate. Basically, for every square foot, you have a proportional increase in the connection fee. And then all this rainbow of other colored lines are different potential methodologies for determining the connection fee with a certain level of a base rate, and they get flatter the more the base rate is included. And so the board deliberated, it listened. We had several board members that, I would say wanted to go with the old house is a house is a house and continue our historic practice. And it's still the most common practice in the sewer industry throughout, I think, not only California, but the country, to just charge a flat rate for a connection fee for sewer. And there are a couple board members that wanted to continue that. There are other ones that were looking at variable. And in the end, after a lot of deliberation, they kind of reached what I would call a compromise, which was going with the 80% base rate and plus 20% variable. So a 2,000 square foot home, any home is going to be $1,160 plus 14 cents per square foot. And if it's a 2,000 square foot home, that's going to equal your $1,440. So that's this kind of brown line here is the 80% line. And so it does take size into consideration, but that base rate is still rather large. And there's, it's about, I think, $200 difference for every 1,000 square feet in construction. And I know I'm throwing a lot of numbers out at you guys at 8 o'clock in the morning, but hopefully you're following. And so again, after board deliberation, they recommended the staff come back with this 80% base rate and 20% variable. We're going to include an escalator on an annual basis to account for changes in construction costs so that we don't get stuck at the same rate for the next 40 years. And the recommendation also is to review this fee every 5 to 10 years to account for any changes in land use in our service area, changes in flow characteristics, and of course, this construction cost. So I think at that point, given the full agenda you have, I was going to stop, but I'm glad to take questions. I guess real quickly, the board has given staff direction. They have not taken formal action on this item. This will be a amendment to our current code book, an ordinance, and they're probably going to be considering that action later this summer for adoption in the October timeframe. So if there's time, Tara, Christine, I'd be glad to field any questions.
Blake, what I'm going to do, because we have such a tight schedule today, is any questions that folks have for Blake, if you can just send them to Christina. And for any of the speakers, we're going to assemble all those questions so we can send them at once to you guys, and then come up with a document that can be shared with the different partners so that it's kind of as efficient as possible for all of you. So speakers aren't getting a million emails, and so we stay on schedule. So thank you very much, Blake.
You're welcome, and feel free to reach out to me directly at Truckee Sand as well.
Great. Yeah, Blake is very helpful. I've had many conversations with him to try to understand things the last 3 months. So yeah, we're going to move on to our next speaker. So this is Boxable is a really interesting company that's working on very creative housing solutions in the form of shippable room models. It's going to be a really interesting presentation as our community continues to make the national news with weekly calls to many of us about our shifting demographics and our housing crunch and local workforce challenges in terms of housing. This is going to be a really interesting presentation. So Greg, are you there?
Yes, I am.
Great. I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay, Christina, can you let me drive on that screen, please?
You can drive. You have the privilege.
Thank you. My screen is up, correct?
Yes.
Yes, we can see your screen.
Great. So thank you very much for allowing me to speak to all of you today. My name is Greg Ellers, and I'm the COO of Boxable. We are a startup in Las Vegas, Nevada. We are in the process of building a 170,000 square foot facility to make what I'm going to explain to you in the next few minutes, our Boxable unit. Why is this so interesting and applicable for your ADU program, workforce housing, low income, senior housing, etc.? It comes down to a couple of critical components. One, the availability of the unit in state. It's rapid deployment, ability to ship quite quickly. So when we think about housing overall, housing forever has been built one at a time. It doesn't matter if you're building two houses next to each other, everything's built the same way. We've taken the principle of the assembly line process. So in our factory, we have a 3 football field long assembly line, and every 2 hours, when we reach utilization, we will be producing one of our 20 by 20 by 9.5 foot casitas fully ready to be shipped. That means it has a full kitchen, it means it has a full bathroom and a washer and dryer. And that can come to the site because it's shipped. Interestingly, if you look on the left-hand side here, it ships 8.5 feet wide by 20 feet long. So that means there's no special road permitting that's required. That means that it can come to the site depending on what your zoning is in the Truckee area or parts of Nevada and other areas. You can either put this, if it's requirement of a cement slab, or it can be put on blocks. The unique aspect to this is not only is it deployable for a permanent home, it's also deployable as a movable home. I'm working in one currently. We've set this up and taken it down 25 or 30 times. The one next to me, well over 50. That's important because it has multiple use cases. And as you see, when you go down here, the way they stack and connect, because they are either 20 by 20, our future sizes that we can manufacture in our plant, 20 by 30, 20 by 40, or 20 by 60, you can stack and connect these together like Legos, if you remember those in your youth, because they all work intermittently together. We can stack these in our current unit 3 high. That's good because over time we'll be able to stack them higher, but 3 high, it also takes advantage of your limited space if that's the issue in your area. These, from a transportation standpoint, as I mentioned to you, they can be pulled because they only weigh 14,000 pounds. These aren't heavy. These can show up on the site. You obviously need to deploy them. The deployment process, depending on your level of sophistication, can take anywhere from an hour to 2 hours. And that means within 2 hours, to the Blake's sewage system, everything's hooked up. You have water, electricity. These are solar capable. And as you can see, the coverage on the roof relative to the size of the space gives you the opportunity to net meter back to the grid, because the overall space that we have and our high R factor, because we don't use wood, where your thermal bridging is the most depleted. Wood is its density is low. And so in the wintertime, obviously in your region, the place housing loses the most amount of heat is through the thermal bridging of the wood that the structure is made of. We don't use wood. So from our standpoint, it gives us a much higher R factor. And so the energy ratings are higher, which in the end also meets some of the new environmental social governance aspects. Over time, when we manufacture these, there's going to be a lot more robotics than what we currently have. We're deploying our first 156 in a hurricane rated area for the government, but we have set up through a testing system, which is based out of a subsidiary of the ICC. So the snow load, which is something you would care about, water resistant. These have a 40-year shelf life from a guaranteed aspect relative to the company that provides the steel that sits on the bottom of our units. We do not have anything on the bottom of our units that needs to be accessible. Everything comes out the back of the building, which also makes it easier to work with. Our fire resistance is high. We don't have the issues with wood where we have rotting. The way we built this is pretty great. Now, the bigger picture, obviously, this is a global opportunity. The total addressable market for the same housing issues you have, they're global, and we're going to have the ability to address a lot of those. This gives you an idea. This is the unit that I'm sitting in, except for there's no couch and bed. My desk is there. And what you can see is you've got a full-size refrigerator, which is very important in any house. It doesn't matter where you are, because you need to be able to have food storage. It comes with a microwave, a stove, a dishwasher, like I said, the full bathroom. And in the lower right-hand corner, you've got the washer dryer. It's one unit. Now, the great thing about this is price. It's where everybody is. These prices, these are some of your different ADU units that you work from and what they actually offer. In full disclosure, due to the higher levels of raw material prices, our prices are going to be a little bit higher than what you see on this. We're experiencing those every day, like everyone, but we're still significantly lower than everybody else. And every other one of these modular manufacturers has the same issue in terms of raw material prices. So their units aren't going to go lower. Ours are always going to be at a better value proposition price than where theirs are. So that is what I wanted to share my screen, and I wanted to stop sharing and take any questions that you might have. And I'd like to, except before I get on that, share that we have been working with Miami-Dade County with respect to the new stimulus package. There's $400 billion that's being allocated for senior. It's a very vague mandate, but what it does do is they see the avenue to provide housing, and they're looking at our boxables for their home healthcare workers, because they have a considerable amount of elderly in Florida, and those people need a place to live. So they're taking some land that's the state that is owned by the county. They're going to repurpose it, and we're going to put those on their property. We're seeing the same thing out of some of the universities. We've been working with some people in Elko, Winnemucca, and Eli on the corporate side, where they're looking at some workforce housing. And it's all very, it's very real time. People like yourselves that have been in this for a lot longer, it's becoming a much greater story around the country. It doesn't matter if you, because of the legislation in California, which took place in 2017, you're seeing it in more areas. And we're seeing a lot of outreach from people coming to us asking if we can be a part of their solution. And my hope today is that potentially some of you in your Truckee area might see Boxable as a potential solution for some of your housing needs. So with that, I will leave it there.
Thank you, Greg. And again, we will make sure that we include all of these questions in our question document to you, because it looks like there are quite a few, just so that we stay kind of on task today and everyone gets a break and we don't hold people too long. So thank you again. And thank you, Bill Austin, the Community Foundation board member, for bringing this to our attention. It's super interesting and very exciting. So thank you. I'm going to turn things over to the Sierra Business Council. They've been working really hard on our statewide policy and legislative updates. So Steve, if you'd like to take it away. Steve, are you on the call?
Let's see. Steve may have had to step away from his computer. Oh, are you there, Steve?
I'm sorry, but go ahead. Go ahead and start, Brittany. I apologize. I was scrambling to get to my unmute button.
No problem at all. So thank you, Christina, for getting our slides going. Hi, everyone. It's great to be with you today. I'm Brittany Bennessy. I'm the Government and Community Affairs Director for Sierra Business Council. Steve and I are going to provide a hopefully fairly brief update on the work of the advocacy or the policy working group, some of the key topic areas that we've been tracking and some actions that we've taken with the legislature this session, as well as news on our recently adopted policy platform. Next slide. So So just wanted to remind everyone of the schedule for our policy working group. Our next meeting is actually Monday. So if you have not been able to attend past meetings, we have our next policy working group meeting Monday at 2 p.m. 2 to 3:30, and we'll be covering a whole lot of stuff, digging a little bit deeper into some of the things that Steve and I are going to cover this morning. Going forward, we'll have meetings, our regularly scheduled meetings through May, and then move to an every other month calendar schedule. We can go to the next slide, Christina. So I'm going to pass it over to Steve. I'm going to come back to our key policy updates, but first we wanted to provide news and an update on our policy objectives and recently adopted platform.
Great. Thanks, everyone. And especially thanks to the members of the advocacy working group who worked on drafting and updating and reviewing the policy platform. It is important to us that we have a set of essentially guiding principles for how we're going to weigh in on legislative action every year. And this is a great document that is very informative. I would encourage everyone in MHC to read the policy platform because I think it was distributed with the agenda. So the process we went through essentially was through a series of convenings of the working group to come up with a set of principles. We had kind of some organizing imperatives here that we wanted to adopt a policy platform that was strongly collaborative. That is, it took the input of everyone that was within the Mountain Housing Council orbit. But we also wanted to adopt a policy platform that didn't commit any individual organization to support and create an opportunity for opt-out on weighing in on any specific piece of legislation. So a reminder that our normal process is we review legislation or administrative policy, we come up with a set of essentially comments on that policy, and then we distribute it and give people the option to opt out if necessary. So within the policy platform, you're going to see a number of key objectives, including one that we think is really important, which is continuing to build the identity and influence of the Mountain Housing Council as a relevant commenter at a state level. So we largely do this through identity building, that is not just individually commenting, but meeting with legislators, but also bringing the Mountain Housing Council policy agenda to other housing organizations across the state of California. Another thing that was particularly important to us this year was continuing to track and weigh in on a solution to the eviction crisis, which we have seen some real progress on that this year, but there's still some work to do on that. And I think this is something that will likely come up again in the legislative process. We are, of course, always looking at increasing funding for housing within our region, which means when we are weighing in, we are specifically analyzing legislative and administrative policy for whether or not there's anything in that policy that restricts funding coming to our region, and making sure that we're commenting to keep the funding available within rural regions of the state. This is an ongoing issue, as I'm sure many of you know, that in the rulemaking and the guideline process, often rural regions get left behind. So we're really focusing on that issue of making sure we maintain our ability to even qualify to receive funding. And then, of course, we're continually looking at this issue of removing policy barriers to building affordable and achievable housing within the region. And there have certainly been a number of kind of legislative efforts at that this year, as you'll see in Brittany's legislative piece. So the key principles that we kind of looked at was, number one, increasing affordability of housing across the region. So analyzing each piece of legislation or policy for that, improving equity and access to housing for disadvantaged low-income households, underserved communities, etc. focusing on building a broader variety of housing that we were supporting in the region. So not just focusing on the affordable side, but increasingly focusing on the achievable range from 80% average median or annual median income to 195%. And this is an area where there has been a lot of kind of discussion across the state, that there's a growing recognition across the state that there is a critical gap in this middle range, and that this is an area that really needs to be looked at more closely. Looking, of course, at essentially what sorts of increased services that we could bring to the region. And then also looking really closely at this concept of retention of existing housing within the region. And then the final kind of key principle or policy area that we're zeroing in on is maintaining a rational permitting and entitlement system. So there have been a number of pieces of legislation this year that have looked at either restricting housing in certain areas or housing moratoriums or other things that we really wanted to weigh in on. And then the last thing I'll mention is that we continue to work through a number of key partnerships, many of which some of you probably already have connections with, but key collaborators at the state level include Housing California, which is a statewide housing advocacy group, Housing Now, which is largely tenants' rights and low-income housing advocacy group, the Rural Smart Growth Task Force, which is a consortium of organizations that are working specifically on rural issues, and then the Housing Task Force within California Forward and the California Economic Summit are really the key partnerships that we're building and attempting to move our platform through. So that's kind of a brief update on the policy platform. It's in your agenda packet, so I really would encourage everyone to read it. Thanks, Brittany.
Great.
Thank you, Steve. So one of the tools and resources that's available to the policy group, as well as all MHC membership that Christina included in this meeting's agenda, is a Google spreadsheet, a legislative tracking spreadsheet that we're updating on a weekly basis. It includes a master list of the priority bills that we're tracking, as well as some of the key topic areas in the bills that fall under there. So this is a great way for Mountain Housing Council members and members within the policy working group to check against their own entities' lobbying activities that might be underway and highlight particular priorities, as well as identify any bills that may have been overlooked either within our realm or their own. So at this point in the legislative session, most of the bills we've been tracking have made it out of their first legislative committee. Rather than digging into each bill individually, I'm going to, though I am going to dig into two. I promise just two. I'm going to provide a few updates on the key topics that the working group has been prioritizing bills around, as well as some of the actions we've taken within those areas. So first off, which Steve previewed, limiting development in the wildland-urban interface has been a major area of discussion across the state, across the legislature this year. Two bills by leading legislators were introduced that would prohibit new residential development in the WUI. That was SB 55 on the Senate side and AB 1295 on the Assembly side. The intention that we were originally given around SB 55, which was a full moratorium on new residential development in the WUI, was intended to be put a flag in the ground and force the conversation to get going about wildfire risk in high hazard fire severity zones. SBC met with Senator Stern's office regarding concerns around this bill early in the session, expressed our concerns about how such a bill would deepen the housing crisis, we encourage that that we could find a middle ground, find a balance between limiting wildfire risk and increasing housing opportunities in our mountain regions. AB 1295 on the assembly side includes similar language, but has not really come up. It has not been scheduled for its hearing yet, but that's something that the working group will be discussing on Monday regarding whether we want to weigh in there. But a little bit more information on SB 55. So in our last meeting with the policy working group, we determined that we would formally oppose this bill. Soon after, amendments were added that would have removed the development prohibition for communities that have developed hazard mitigation plans. And then days after that, while in committee, the bill's author announced that he would be holding the bill until next year and supporting SB 12, a bill that in its current state, we have discussed as a working group would be a much preferable alternative to SB 55. So SB 55 is set to the side. Good news that we don't have to deal with any potential housing moratorium in our region, and can save that fight for this year while supporting reasonable and comprehensive wildfire risk reduction strategies. So SB 12 in its current state would require local governments to include in their housing safety elements a comprehensive retrofit strategy to reduce the risk of property loss and damage in the event of a wildfire, as well as identification of high hazard fire risk areas within their jurisdictions and feasible, reasonable strategies for reducing wildfire risk in those areas. So this is something that the working group will be focusing in on during our meeting on Monday, identifying what sort of action we want to take. We want to ensure that this bill doesn't take on some of the harsher restrictions of SB 55 and remains a reasonable balance between reducing wildfire risk and allowing for opportunities for increased housing. And then next up, CEQA streamlining, as Steve highlighted in our policy platform, is one of our key areas. So the extension of the Jobs and Economic Improvement Leadership Act is one of the bills that we've been tracking. This is SB 7 by Senator Tony Atkins. It would allow the governor to certify a housing project ahead of its CEQA permitting. This is a streamlining policy that's been in place since 2010. Would be interested to hear whether local projects have been able to take advantage of this provision, and this bill would extend it for another 5 years. We can move to the next slide, Christina. Thank you so much. So another area we've been discussing, which relates to one of our to the Boxable presentation, is increasing density. This has included some supportive ADU policies that you can find in the legislative tracking spreadsheet. This conversation is also focused around that increasing density overlaps not only with increasing our housing inventory, but also with increasing community climate resilience and reducing sprawl in wildfire risk areas. The Mays bill noted here is one that we've started digging into and we'll be discussing on Monday. It would eliminate local impact fees, including zoning fees for affordable housings that receive density bonuses. There are a number of bills focused on increasing density bonus opportunities that we've been tracking. Taking a look at this bill is something we'll be doing on Monday. It passed out of committee unanimously. So interested to hear what some of our local government and other partners are thinking about the removal of those fees and how that would impact potential projects. On the other side of the legislature, SB 10 by Senator Wiener, who is a real housing advocate, would increase density zoning and infill opportunities in transit-rich and job-rich areas of a community. This relates to a bill that we track very closely and were supportive of last year that didn't make its way through the legislature. This was reintroduced. Measures like this can help increase housing and decrease traffic and vehicle emissions. This has a mitigation language for communities that have mitigation plan for reducing wildfire risk. So it's something that we were originally looking at and working with the office to determine that our communities would be eligible for this authorization for increased density, and have confirmed that we would be. Next up is a housing bond. For those who are tracking any activity in the legislature, you know that it is a very bond-rich field right now. There's a broadband bond moving, 2 climate resilience bonds moving, a natural working lands and agriculture bond, as well as a housing bond. So this bond by Senate Pro Tem Tony Atkins is part of that overall Senate housing package. This would place a $6.5 billion bond for affordable housing for homeless and low-income families on the November 2022 ballot, if passed by the legislature. This bond isn't getting a whole lot of attention compared to broadband and the climate bonds in particular, but it's something that we're watching closely and has been scheduled for, has made it out of its first committee hearing. And then lastly, as Steve mentioned, a major focus of our working group has been the state's eviction moratorium. There is an Assembly bill, AB 15, that was introduced at the very start of the session that would extend the moratorium through the end of the year. This bill has not yet been set for committee. The state's current moratorium, as many of you know, is set to expire at the end of June. In Monday's meeting, we'll be discussing any updates for our strategy, considering the level of reopening that is happening, and any advocacy efforts that we want to take to encourage the presentation of this bill as we head towards the end of the moratorium and that looming eviction crisis that we've been watching so closely. So on that positive, hopeful note, I wanted to check, Steve, with you to see if there's anything else you wanted to add, as well as offer the opportunity for any of our policy working group members to provide any input, anything else that we might have missed.
Yeah, I think my last comment and observation would be that this is, once again, a difficult legislative season because of COVID, because of the limit on the number of bills that can be heard, and because of the disruption in Sacramento around recall. So I think there's going to be a period here between now and November where we don't see as much traction as we would want, because it's difficult for the governor's office to sign anything controversial between now and November. And we're just going to have to hunker down and accept that, not just in the housing field, but that's going to be true across a wide number of policy initiatives in the state, right? So, I think it's really important that we're lining up for what the next political period is. And that's really part of the intent of the policy platform, to put us in a really strong position for a post-recall intervention. So that's my, I hate to be kind of saying expect nothing to happen, but the reality is, under the terms, I see John Falk laughing, under the terms of a recall election, it's very difficult for a chief executive to take a controversial policy position. So,
but we can get some small wins.
Yeah, and we'll keep working on those. So.
Wonderful, thanks, guys. At this time, Christina, I'm going to have you put up our agenda just so folks can check in on where we are and kind of know when the break is coming. So we just finished the Mountain Housing Council updates. Before that, we had community impact storytelling. We're about to get on to the Regional Housing Implementation Plan update, which I know folks are really excited about. And then we'll go into break. And after that, we'll have a discussion on achievable local housing, do partner updates and public comment, and then close up for the day. So for that,
sorry to interrupt you, but we did not finish our Mountain Housing Council updates. We have 2 other report
yes.
outs.
Oh yes, I'm sorry. That's right. Yes, we've got 2 more. We've got 2 more updates within Mountain Housing Council, and then we'll move on to our HIP. So awesome, thank you. Great. So with that, Heidi, do you want to go into the Housing Funders Network update and deal makers?
Yes, thanks. Thanks, everybody. Good to see everybody. Someday we'll be meeting in person, I hope. Great. So I am reporting out on the Housing Funders Network and Dealmakers update. So this is pretty exciting work. As you all know, this is a group of our local funders and resource partners that play a part in our housing projects throughout our community. And it's a great place where we get to align our resources and eventually be talking about, seeking additional funding opportunities as well. The team members are from Placer County, the Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency, the Martis Fund, Town of Truckee, and TTCF. Next slide, please. This is something I'm really excited about. The team developed. It's a developer funding request form. This came out of many conversations of all of us talking to many different developers in the community. We thought, what if we had one place where we could capture all this information and then come back as a funding group and talk about all of the details of the project, what are some of the challenges, some of the opportunities. So it's really like a one point of entry place for developers to submit this form. And hopefully, we could leverage new dollars with this data. And we're also collecting data, getting feedback on challenges and maybe some other opportunities as well. So if you have people who you're talking to about projects, please send them to the MHC website to fill out the form. And then the group will talk about it. We meet monthly. So next slide, please. And then the housing tracker, which I think you're all familiar with, but this is a great tool. This provides important updates on all of our housing in the community and region, and it's updated frequently. Thank you, Christina. And also the jurisdictions also do review this for accuracy and also any updates as well. So it's always updated. It's a great tool to use with your organization or your boards as well. So next slide, please. The Dealmakers meeting, we had our first one this year on April 2nd. And this was a place where the developers and contractors, investors, and some of our MHC partners came together to discuss some of the solutions and housing challenges that we have in our region. It's also a great place to talk about opportunities as well. Some of the key takeaways really it was around the timeline and expectations for our developers and meeting their requirements for their projects. It was obvious, it was very critical. And then also the approval process, can't change. And so there's a lot of good information that came out of this. And as a region, we have and need many tools in our toolkit to make these projects successful. And that also fees within the jurisdictions remain a barrier as well for some of these developers. So it was good to hear some feedback from our local developers as well. Next slide, please. And the housing cost analysis tool is something else that we've been talking about at the funders meeting. You saw this at the last MHC meeting, and this is a great tool that TRPA is using to look at the various costs of different types of housing in the region. And I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, they developed this tool and have given the tool also to the Mountain Housing Council, and I believe this will live on the website. And we just need to put the North Lake Tahoe Truckee data into this tool, but this would help us to determine, development needs and costs on the North Shore in Truckee. That's it. Thanks, everybody.
Wonderful. Thank you, Heidi.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, we're going to move on to Allison, who's going to discuss supportive and homelessness housing working group update. Thanks, Allison.
Thank you, Tara. And again, welcome to the Mountain Housing Council. It's lovely to have you here. So I will just give a very brief update on the homelessness working group. And if you could go ahead and go to the next slide, please. So just to remind us all, the work that our homelessness working group is focused on under the Mountain Housing Council is really this orange side of our local housing bridge, and really focusing on housing solutions for individuals experiencing homelessness, really focusing on homelessness prevention strategies and activities. And the housing types that this group is focused on are really shelters and affordable rentals. So next slide, please. And so you may recall that back in October, Jasmine and I came and gave you all an overview of the history of our homeless work as a community and kind of our current focus and efforts. And at that time, it was determined that our homeless coalition would become an official working group of the Mountain Housing Council. So we're really excited that transition has been happening over the last few months. We're excited, again, that Tara is on board to help with that transition. And what that looks like is that our homeless coalition will now adopt kind of the format, the structure of the other working groups under the Mountain Housing Council. So what that means is that we will now meet monthly, which we have been doing, but we'll just put a little more structure to it. We'll start tracking data more intentionally. We'll provide monthly or quarterly updates to you all. And again, really work to align our homelessness efforts under the overall Mountain Housing Council. So really the first step in doing that is to adopt a charter with our homelessness working group. And so we are meeting next Wednesday, April 28th at 2:30 in the afternoon. Many of you are already part of our homeless working group. For those of you that aren't, we really welcome you to attend. Many of you, if you're not coming, you have staff that are representing your organization. So again, we welcome any and all participation. And so what I wanted to very quickly do is just talk about the draft charter so that you all have a good understanding of the focus areas and how we'll be working as a working group. And then I can answer any questions in the chat box at a later date. So again, just to ensure that we are aligned with the Mountain Housing Council, we will be meeting once a month. We will work collaboratively to end homelessness and improve policies surrounding securing permanent short and long-term housing. We've had lots of conversations around long-term supportive housing, lots of conversations around how do we shore up some of our emergency shelter services. We are really working to build capacity and sustainabilities for strategies surrounding homelessness. As many of you all know, and as we've talked about, we've had a very difficult time as a community establishing and sustaining homeless services for all sorts of different reasons. But we are, again, excited to really focus on how do we ensure as a community that we're providing housing and homelessness prevention services to all of our residents. And again, we are working to embed our homelessness efforts and solutions under the broader Mountain Housing Council. Next slide, please. We are also working to ensure that we can leverage community engagement in education. One of our most significant challenges is that we really lack data that reflects accurately the number of individuals experiencing homelessness in our community. We do a HUD homeless count once a year, which is done in the winter time. So we know that that does not reflect the number of individuals who are experiencing homelessness in the summer. That number often increases. And so we really need to get our hands around like who is experiencing homelessness in our community? What does that look like? And what are the specific situations so that we can better educate ourselves as a working group, as a Mountain Housing Council, and the broader community, and then we can develop the most appropriate solutions. We're really working to create a continuum of services that ranges from, again, like emergency shelter services to longer term supportive housing services, and then really assist individuals who are at risk of experiencing homelessness. We know how difficult housing is right now, so we want to keep people who are fragilely housed, and with any support services, with any housing applications, because we know that can often be a barrier. So I'm going to wrap up with like a little pitch as well. So next slide, please, Christina. So many of you are aware of, this is not the right slide, but anyways, there's a rental assistance program that's currently available right now through Placer in Nevada County. So we're really encouraging folks to, if you're working with folks who are fragilely housed, to access rental assistance programs, and we'll share a slide later, but there's two specific websites, one through Nevada County, one through Placer County. The deadline may be extended, but for the Placer program, Christina, I believe it's April 30th. And so we feel this there's an incredible opportunity to help folks with rental assistance, but again, the window is very short. So we will provide the information in the chat box. Many of your organizations have already pushed out information to the broader community about this rental assistance program. Again, there's one through Nevada County, one through Placer County, so it's a little bit complicated, but again, as many folks as we can assist access these programs will behoove our homelessness prevention efforts. So thank you very much for the time.
Well, thank you so much, Allison, for all of your good, wonderful, amazing work. All right. Well, next we are going to move on to the Regional Housing Implementation Plan. Jake or Ashley, are you there?
We're here. Good morning. I have never seen such an on-time start to an agenda item. Kudos to all of you. Okay. Do you want me to share, Christina, or are you going to run up or show up the presentation here?
Awesome. Is my screen sharing? I think I have it up.
It is. Thank you. Well, good morning, everyone. I just saw Stacy's chat. Good morning, everyone. My name is Ashley Cannett. I've been before you before. I'm a principal with Economic and Planning Systems, and along with my colleague Jake Craner, who I see down here in the grid, and SBC, an organization you know well, Steve and Brittany and Jill are on the line as well. We wanted to bring you a little bit of an update of where we are with our regional housing action plan. And so this is just a status update, and we'll be happy to, maybe we can go into the next slide, Christina, and I can talk a bit about the agenda. So we've been busy working, developing, thinking through something that we're going to be calling the AHA process. I'll tell you more about that in just a moment. Last time we were before you, we talked a little bit about this opportunity site selection process we're going to be going through. I want to bring you an update there. I know you've all probably seen information out there about this survey that we've just launched. Looking for everyone's help there as well, getting this out and about and into the community, but Brittany will tell you a little bit more about that. And then I know everyone's eagerly waiting for the sort of the latest on the housing needs data refresh. And so my colleague Jake will walk all of us through that preliminary data. And we want to leave a little bit of time for questions and answers too. So that's the bit of the agenda. Thank you, Christina. So what we have been talking about is this AHA process. And I actually don't know to what extent this terminology has been launched yet. Tara, will you give me a nod if people have heard this yet? No. Okay. So we were really settling on a name for what our process, what our study, what we were going to be delivering to Mountain Housing Council. And we put a bunch of names, a bunch of suggestions up on the website, tossed them or on the kind of into the hopper, tossed them all around, debated, and landed on achievable housing for all. It allows us to talk about the AHA process, an AHA stamp. So I think Tara will roll that out a little bit more fully. There's some logo and some more comprehensive thinking about that already. But what we're really trying to do here, the more we're working on this, the more it's really coming into focus. We're wanting to, not just turn around another matrix of tools, another matrix of best practices, but really show how we can take those tools and best practices and leverage them. And we want to really sort of shine a light on, we want to illuminate and demonstrate this process that's going to result in achievable community housing. And what we're beginning to see is that this process can really function as a roadmap for what can become MHC's housing hub, a concept that I know you've all talked about before. So what we have down here in a shaded box is what I'm just calling a working definition right now, something that I know will change with input. We'll continue to evolve it, but we're beginning to see this housing hub as an entity that will really act and serve as an ally in the process of all of this. So it's going to be a place, an entity, a group of people where we're providing technical assistance, problem solving for site owners in a way that's really looking for solutions. So building workforce housing and really engaging the community, bringing the community input to the design process earlier, making sure that the community's needs are met. So working definition, but it's this process that we want to leave you with. Next slide, please. And Stacy had this great idea to kind of think of it as a triangle, which I love. It's, we've got these three corners of the triangle. We've got the developer entity who's always going to be focused on, what is the vision? What can we do here? The jurisdiction that comes in a little bit more with a regulatory perspective and what is allowed. And then there's the community, what do we want to be? And until we have all three of these corners really functioning together, we don't have a fully ready process. And if any one of these corners isn't fully there or isn't lit up, it can add years to the process. And we see that every day in our work. And so that's what we're wanting to do. We're wanting to bring these three aspects together. We're wanting to bring these three corners together and show a process by which that can happen. So this is a process to build readiness. What we're going to be producing is a replicable template So we are going to be focusing on 3 specific sites, but the idea is that in doing so, we're showing a process that can be replicated for other sites throughout the region. And at the end of it all, what you get is a stamp of approval, an AHA stamp of approval. So that's the emerging concept. And Stacy or Steve, I don't know if either of you want to add any detail here. I lost Stacy's face.
I'm here. I'm sitting in really bright light. So
there you are.
Yeah, I think you did a great job of capturing the vision. I think that a lot of regional housing action plans are already captured in many of the housing elements. So housing elements require, that action list of programs and policies that drive the housing within each jurisdiction. What we didn't want to do was just basically glean those and kind of pull them together and then put them back out there. We wanted to push ourselves to think about, like, how do you truly create a way for all systems go with housing in a region? And so we started talking about readiness, and that's a term that the Community Foundation uses frequently, because you can throw money at something, but if there isn't readiness, if there isn't strategy, leadership, community buy-in, all the right things, then the money doesn't accomplish what you intend. And so as Mountain Housing Council partners are looking at their programs and their policies, all those actions, as we work together to attract more resources, financial resources to our region, we still have to have a readiness and a buy-in in all 3 of these areas. And so we believe that this process that the team is working on with the right committees and community engagement, that we'll create a replicable model so that no matter what the jurisdiction, no matter what the site, we can do our best to ready all 3 aspects of this triangle so that housing can get kind of created. So thank you for letting me kind of say it in our own words, because I think this is a big idea, and I think we're all really excited to work on it. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that additional context. And one of the things we've been, focused on and thinking about as this idea is evolving, the questions come up: well, who is this for? Who's going to use this? And it's not just for developers. There are a lot of sophisticated developers in the area. It is for developers, but it's not just for developers. And there are a lot of developers that could use a little, extra technical help, a little help figuring out these processes. It's not just for the jurisdictions. The jurisdictions know these sites well. The jurisdictions know the constraints in the regulatory environment, but it is also for jurisdictions. And it's not just for the community, but it's for all of these stakeholders who are involved in the process, really trying to demonstrate all the ways that entities and people and stakeholders can work together and kind of bring their best to affect this process. Okay, Christina, thank you. So I've mentioned these 3 sites, and we've been talking about these for a while. We wanted to be very careful about this site selection, so we could, this is about the site selection process, so that we could really, defend in some ways how we landed on them, and make sure that we were choosing sites that were, not so ready for development that they're slam dunks, but not, nor are we looking for sites that have, such hurdles or such such constraints that they're not good examples for showing how this process can be effective. So that took some doing, as you might imagine, but we do have 3 fairly ready sites that are under review. We were looking at things like, jurisdictional awareness, readiness, is it in the housing element already, for example? Has there been any developer interest? Is there a partner out there willing to work with us in some way? Is there available infrastructure in terms of, the backbone infrastructure, transit infrastructure, social infrastructure, and then environmental considerations, just looking for, bright red flags, if any, just to sort of know the lay of the land. And so where we've landed is, I think we've got a really good selection. We've got one site from Placer County, one site from the town of Truckee, one site in Nevada County, not the town. And we've got a mix of ownership, private and public, and a mix of development challenges. Some sites are really very clearly infill. In some cases, we're going to need a little bit of land assembly. In other cases, we have some environmental considerations that, we don't think are showstoppers, but, are going to require a little bit of doing. So we're not quite ready to divulge the specifics, only because we want to really check off all the, sort of political realities of it before sharing too broadly. We don't want to get ahead of any, sort of private landowner efforts or interests just right at this moment, but all will be shared, and I'm really excited about the sites. I think they provide there's a lot of good variety within the sites. And so down below is just sort of tracking where we are on that. We looked at a whole long inventory from all of the jurisdictions. We did some preliminary checking, per those criteria up above. We've landed on site selection, just doing any sort of like fatal flaw, poison pill testing right now. And we're working with, you may remember from one of the early meetings, we're working with Design Workshop and Steve Knoll, and they're now coming into the process, and they're going to help us from a planning perspective and a massing perspective and a graphic perspective. They're going to help us start to lay this out into these deliverables that we've been talking about. Next, Christina. So again, I'm not going to go into quite specifics, but we've got we have these 3 sites. I think the way to think about them is, they're pilot sites for us. We're beta testing this AHA process, and we're hoping that this is really going to serve as a foundation for the next decade of work. So for MHC, so these templates are really going to serve for a long time to come. But it's really as important, if not more important at this stage, to understand what these sites are not. We can't guarantee that housing is going to be built on this site within the next 18 months or at any period of time, really, and nor is it really a guarantee for funding. Funding is for sure a piece of what we're looking at, whether it's public funding or philanthropic dollars, grant opportunities. We're bringing all of that to bear. But because this is a process that we're showing, we're not applying for development approvals on these sites. It's not a guarantee for these things. So just want to manage some expectations up front. We'll keep reminding everyone of that. And this, I'm going to actually turn it over to SBC. I think Brittany wants to share where we are with our survey work.
Absolutely. Thank you, Ashley. So hopefully everyone on the call has seen so far that we have kicked off our community employee and employer survey and are really putting rubber to the road on engaging the community within the update to the housing needs assessment process. So outreach kicked off last week. So far, we've received over 400 community responses, which is very exciting. Our goal, however, is 2,000 responses. So between now and the anticipated survey close of May 7th, we have a real need for all hands on deck. So outreach has started with the folks on this call, as well as other Mountain Housing Council members. We're really relying on all of you to help share the surveys with your network. I know Christina and Jill with Sierra Business Council have been working diligently to check in with all of you on your outreach opportunities. Please continue to use us as a resource. We've also been reaching out to strategic partners outside of MHC, including major employers and community networks. This includes the local social media groups like the Truckee Tahoe People Facebook page, as well as the housing and classifieds pages. Landing Local has generously offered to share with their 400 family waiting list that I'm sure many of you read about in the SF Gate article last week. As well as their own, the remainder of their expansive network. We've also submitted press releases to Moonshine Inc. and the Sierra Sun, The survey's timeline doesn't fit with Moonshine's print schedule, but they have agreed to share it on social media and online, which we're really grateful for. KTKE has offered to do a public service announcement on the survey. So we really have a lot of our key partners in the area stepping out to ensure that the community's voice is heard and the experiences that folks have had over the last year that aren't covered by some of the quantifiable data available is included in our needs assessment update. As I mentioned, our goal is 2,000 responses, and it's going to require all of us sharing the surveys with our professional and personal local networks. We have outreach materials available in both English and Spanish, including flyers, social media, and email templates, graphics, as well as the press release. So far, it is clear, maybe unsurprisingly, that we have some extra work needed in order to reach our Spanish-speaking community. So any extra support that members can provide in that area will really help us ensure that we're reaching the full breadth of the Truckee Tahoe region. With that, I will kick it back to you, Ashley.
Thanks. And I think I'm just going to really hand it over to my colleague, Jake, who's been working on the refresh of the housing needs analysis that was done back in 2016. I know Jake will touch on this, but I'll just say it so you hear it twice. This is really preliminary data. We're trying to give you a taste of where we're going, but we are dependent on some results from the survey to really close the loop on this piece of it. And as you just heard, the survey is in process. So we'll share with you where we are, but please know that there's more coming from the survey that lets us bring it all together full circle. And with that, Jake, I'll hand it to you.
All right. Thanks, Ashley, and good morning, everyone. So here's just a quick update on where we are with the housing needs assessment. This is just the map of the study area. I'm sure you all are very familiar. So for this needs assessment, we're looking at the study area as a whole, as well as sub-geographies, the town of Truckee, as well as East Placer County. Next slide, please. Oh, those are different colors. Okay, well, these are the four cohorts we are looking at that add up to create the total housing need for the area, and they are resident workers in Truckee who are inadequately housed. And within that cohort, we have subcategories of seniors and veterans. The second cohort are in-commuters who do not currently live in the study area or in Truckee or in East Placer, but would prefer to live there if adequate housing were to become available. The third are seasonal workers, and then the fourth are the unhoused population. Next slide, please. Okay, so where we are for each of these cohorts, resident workers, we have pretty much complete estimates using public sources. There might be minor tweaks going forward, but they are for the most part finalized. In-commuters and seasonal workers both rely heavily on the survey data, so it'll still be a few weeks or so before we have good estimates for those. For homeless, Allison mentioned earlier, we are relying on this HUD point-in-time count, which determined in 2020 that there are 44 individuals who are unhoused in the area. But as she mentioned, this count takes place in the winter, so this likely fluctuates a decent amount over the course of the year. And then for the sub-cohorts, veterans and seniors, we have preliminary estimates, but we still need to talk a bit more with MHC to make sure we incorporate everyone they're looking for these subcohorts. Next slide, please. So before we go into the housing needs, we're just going to give a quick overview of the housing inventory. Unfortunately, this data is a few years old. We get it from Esri, which was last updated in 2018. So total housing units in the study area, just a bit over 34,000. The vast majority are single-family homes. And then the next largest product type are 2 to 4 units, so still pretty low density. When multifamily of over 5 units is just about 3,000, so less than 10% of the total. And then a fair amount of mobile homes as well. Next slide, please. So one of the more salient features of the housing stock is only about a third are listed as households, so they're actually occupied. And we have a breakdown between owner-occupied and renter-occupied by length of tenure. So kind of as you'd expect, owner-occupied units have been occupied longer, generally over 10 to 20 years, whereas renter-occupied units generally less than 10 years. Next slide, please. So when we talk about housing need, especially for resident workers, we are relying on this data set from HUD, which gives the proportion of households within each income category that are overburdened, overcrowded, or underhoused. When we talk about overburdened, that just refers to more people than basically ought to be living in a unit R, or sorry, that's overcrowded. Overburdened refers to people who are, or households paying more than 30% of their gross income per month on housing. And then underhoused refers to basically the inadequacy of the facilities, plumbing, kitchens, etc. All right, on to the next slide. So here's where we are for the resident workforce in the region, about just under 4,700. So this is a little bit over a 10% increase than what we saw in 2016. As you would expect, the majority kind of fall between 80% and 160%. And then the vast majority would be 1 or 2 bedroom units that are needed. Next slide, please. So for the subgeographies, we've got sort of the same proportion in terms of units. Truckee would require probably around 2,500 units, whereas East Placer is a bit less at about 1,850. And then in terms of the income breakdown, it's similar to the study area as a whole. And then on to the next slide. So this is probably of equal, if not greater importance, this projected need for 2025. As I mentioned, a lot of the data that we're using now is a couple years old. So given this is a forward-looking assignment, really looking to see what the need will be in a few years is a very useful thing to do. So this takes the need that we've calculated based on currently available data and applies the California Employment Development projection for the area that there will be a 4.3% increase in the total number of jobs. So this has been applied uniformly to each income category. Unfortunately, the EDD does not specify the income levels for these projections. Next slide, please. And so the same thing has been done for Truckee and East Placer as it's countywide. We just used that 4.3% figure for both of these subgeographies as well. Oh, and another thing it's important to note is we assume for these projections that each additional job will be housed within each of the study area, Truckee or East Placer County. That might not be the case in reality, but in order to generate a conservative estimate, we figured this was the correct methodology to use. Next slide, please. So for the sub-cohorts, this refers to working veterans and working seniors. And then pretty similar proportions in terms of income categories and product types. So for veterans, a little over 400 households. That's not individual veterans. There are about 1.3 to 1.6 workers per household. depending on the geography or subgeography. And then for seniors, that's about 1,000 households for working seniors. And on to the next slide, please. So here's where we are for the in-commuter cohort. We have obtained the total number of in-commuters for the study area as well as for the subgeographies, and that number is about 8,900. Once you apply 1.3 workers per household for the whole study area, that comes out to 6,900, a little over 6,900 in-commuter households. And then the way we obtain the need is based on the survey, essentially the number of in-commuters who would like to relocate into the study area should attainable housing become available. In the 2016 survey, that number was pretty high. It was about 85%. So if that were to be the case again this go around, the number would be, I guess, between 55 and 6,200, probably around 5,800, which is fairly similar to what we saw in 2016. And then for seasonal workers, we are still pretty early on in the process and don't really have any information on that cohort for you at this time. So I will pass it back to Ashley if there are any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. I don't know if Steve or Tara or if there are any sort of like concluding remarks, but that's it for our prepared slides. And of course, we're happy to answer questions.
Just one concluding remark working on this. Number one, have to remember all preliminary until we have survey results. Really important, right? This is a discussion point now. But number two, it did not escape my notice that the need of 4,896 units today is an increase of 800 units from where we were in 2016. So, this is a high hill to climb that will take a long time to climb, right? So, that's why this group is really so important, is that Sisyphean task is going to require a commitment of the community for 20 to 30 years to really address this issue. But I think that variance from 2016, I'll be curious to see if it plays out at the end of the data collection process, but it's a little sobering. So.
And just to add on to Steve's point, a lot of that increase comes from the increased proportions in that HUD data set that I showed you. So the proportion within each income category that are overburdened, underhoused, overcrowded has increased. It's not necessarily a larger population or
yeah. And just to add a positive note, Shauna Doherty or Jen Calloway can speak more to this too, but there are a number of affordable housing units that are going to be opening up this summer and fall in Truckee. So that's kind of exciting. I believe the tally is around 250 or so between Frischman Hollow and Coldstream Commons and others. So that's just a, happy side to that data, but they know a lot more than I do about that. We do have quite a bit of time for Q&A for this. If folks want to ask Ashley, Steve, Jake any questions, and then we can break early as well. So go ahead if anyone has any questions for them. Anyone? I also just want to bring up that we will be holding a speaker series this summer and fall. This was kind of a product of Shauna Doherty's webinar series, which have been very, very popular, and Stacy's ideas. But we have a lot of great topics lined up, and several of those series are going to focus specifically on development projects so that the community has a chance to cue in either during their lunchtime or after work to kind of learn a little bit more about different terms like what achievable and deed restricted means to particular development projects and how they came to fruition, what projects are stuck and kind of which ones are entitled and which ones aren't. So some really interesting topics that we'll be sending out more information on this summer and fall as well. So keep an eye out for those.
And Tara, John Falk has his hand raised.
Oh, okay, great.
And
Thanks, John.
Shauna has a question in the chat that I'd love to respond to when the time is right.
Okay, great. Why don't we go with John first, and then Steve, you can answer that question. Does that sound good?
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you. I wanted to reinforce especially as it relates to the concept of survey outreach and updating the true need and the gap that I think, frankly, is growing more substantially than is initially reflected in the data sets that are just collected by the Fed. And, we talk about availability and affordability of housing for our locals all the time. But when we talk about the employers, that quality employee attraction and then retention is becoming hypercritical throughout the region. You can talk to fire department, police departments, school district, any major employer, even service sector employers are finding it difficult to impossible to either attract or retain people. And I hear story after story from people that have accepted jobs like within the school district, only to then come up here, look for housing, and have to not renege, but essentially rescind their acceptance because they just can't find a place to live. And other people that are currently living here, teaching here, that are having their rental houses sold out from under them. That's a privilege and a right of the homeowner. I wouldn't fault them for that, to try to make the money while they can, while the market's up, but it displaces that renter. And I know of at least one particular high school science teacher who is now living out of a hotel and is going to be leaving the area at the end of the school year. So this is not a pending problem or a little bit of a problem. We're eventually going to end up seeing our quality of workforce degrade to the point where it degrades the quality of life here unless we deal with it. Thank you.
John.
Yeah, here, John. We're definitely seeing that in the consultations we're doing through the Small Business Development Center with businesses in Truckee. This is really a critical problem for long-term economic development and prosperity for the region. So, but to go to Shauna's question, Shauna asked what types of housing we're looking at analyzing within the opportunity site. So although we're not ready to talk about the specific opportunity sites, they do represent a pretty broad range of different types of housing. Everything from employee dormitory style housing to some affordable units at 80% AMI or below, to multifamily achievable housing between 120% and 180% of average median income. And then there is one site where we're looking at essentially kind of the challenge of assembling ownerships in order to get to the types of projects that we would want to see within the region. And it has not escaped our notice that many of the jurisdictions are saying one of the biggest problems they're having right now is that 150% AMI, 2-bedroom, 2-bath, market rate project that comes in at $500,000 that a family can start building equity in. And that, it's obvious that that's a huge problem within the region. And then an answer to a second question from Shauna, yes, the data will be broken down between jurisdictions. To Jake, you might want to address that, how much they can disassemble the data between Placer County and Nevada County, but most of it, I think, is separable so that you can see what the different jurisdictions' specific information is. And the survey is designed to break it down actually by neighborhood across that entire jurisdiction.
Yes, everything I showed will be broken down by the study area, Truckee, as well as East Placer.
Great. Do we want to go? I'm just going in order of a hand raised or a question asked in chat. Fred, do you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Are you speaking with me, Tara?
Yes.
I was asking about the specific sites, the building sites that Ashley mentioned, whether or not they'd been chosen.
Yeah, we have selected three sites. We're not quite ready to share them. We just want to test all of the political realities of them, and we don't want to make anything not political realities in terms of, you know, future process. That's a part of what we want to describe, but we don't want to make anything harder for any of these landowners or current developers right now. So we're kind of trying to just test that in this moment. But we do have 3 sites. Excuse me. One in Nevada County, unincorporated, one in Placer County, and one in the town. And we also have backup sites for each of those jurisdictions, just in case something falls away. And I promise to share as soon as we can. But I'm excited about them. They're good opportunities.
I wanted to jump in on that too, Ashley, because I just want to acknowledge, you know, for those of you who aren't living and breathing and eating housing every day, and for those of you who are, you'll appreciate this, that the team was very intentional about picking site selections. After the last quarterly meeting, we had a lot of outreach of people interested in us picking their sites. And our immediate reaction was, this is so exciting. And then it was like, do they know what they're getting? They're getting a process. They're not getting this kind of red carpet, we're going to work on this, you know. So we had to make sure that there was, you know, the right selection and balance of public land versus private landowner land, that the private landowner land didn't appear as a conflict of interest or advancing somebody. There was a lot of conversation. I think there was one particular Friday where Steve was like, I just spent 6 hours in a spreadsheet that I can't get my head out of, because it was also environmental impacts that we were looking at, because, you know, we were like, do we pick a site that's too easy, or do we pick a site that has some challenges? And then we finally got to where we had 3 sites, and I think this was Wednesday, so 2 days ago, that we were all behind. And then it was put on the table, you know, is there a chance we could do harm by announcing these sites if everybody isn't ready and if all systems aren't go on all the partners? And so the team very quickly said, you know, let's walk the council through the work that's been done, our intention, our strategy, the conversations that have taken place with our jurisdictions leading the conversation. And so I wanted to just kind of underscore, like, this stuff is hard. And if information gets out there, we could actually end up doing harm and slowing down the process for housing in our community. And so I wanted to put a finer point and also a deep appreciation for the team that is on this, because it's a daily conversation for them on how we keep this stuff moving forward.
Great. Thank you, Stacy. I believe Teresa Crimmins, you've had your hand up. Thanks for your patience.
Yeah, of course. Thank you. So I'm Teresa. I'm with Sierra Community House, and I will apologize. I needed to step away for a moment. So if any of this was covered, please forgive me. But just in response to John's comment about renters having houses sold out from under them, I absolutely agree. You know, you can't fault people for doing that. However, I just want to read you a quick snippet from our legal program director, who says that on a daily basis, we're helping tenants negotiate appropriate and lawful notice and relocation compensation. A lot of landlords, even those who are working with an attorney, are not accustomed to the Tenant Protection Act, which is not a COVID thing. It was just a, you know, new legislation. And just to point out that the difference in loss of time and potentially loss of relocation compensation can be the difference between somebody being able to stay and somebody needing to leave the region. So just so that we're sort of conscious of that, I'm seeing a lot of nodding, so that's good. Thank you. And one other thing I just wanted to mention, and I'm sorry, I know that I beat this drum a lot, but that just to share that we are, again, working with Legal Services of Northern California around a mobile home park in Kings Beach that is being converted. And so again, just to kind of put that in our heads around what does retention of existing affordable housing look like, specifically within the realm of mobile home parks, where there's kind of a risk for loss that's different than the deed restricted properties. Thanks.
Yeah, Teresa, that's a huge issue within our policy advocacy platform and our conversations with the Rural Smart Growth Task Force that addresses these rural housing issues. I know it's an issue that Housing California, the California Coalition for Rural Housing, Northern California Rural Legal Assistance is in that group as well. So we recognize that as a major issue, and that retention is going to be a really critical piece.
Thanks, Steve.
All right, great. Brett, did you want to ask any of your questions of economic and planning systems? And Ashley and Jake, or did you want to kind of defer those to comments, Q&A doc for later?
Are you referencing my question regarding a regional entity?
No, more just about kind of why the housing supply is low in terms of development.
Yeah, I just wanted to point that out. It's not something that obviously we can change at this point, but I think it is a point for us to look at, just in that as we move through this system, if for some reason the market changes, we know that there were repercussions about not adding supply to the market for 3 years, and suddenly that does catch up.
Right. Thank you, Brett. Thomas, I saw your question in the chat. I'm not sure. I'd rather not put anyone on the spot to kind of provide an update on any stuck units at this time, but I can provide you with an update on that later if you'd like, unless anybody would like to speak to any kind of status on stuck projects that are currently entitled that we can help bring to fruition. That was his question.
I don't have data on that at this point, but I love the question, because that's that is low-hanging fruit in theory for all of us. So
well,
I appreciate
that really is what the AHA process is most, I would argue, is most likely to be used for. Right? Is existing land that either has entitlements or the ability to be entitled that we already have in our planning processes that aren't moving, right? Like the larger sites by high capacity affordable housing developers, they have in-house capacity to move those projects, right? It's these kind of 10-acre infill sites that I think are much more difficult to deal with, you know?
Mm-hmm. And Thomas, this is probably a question that's best for the Housing Funders Network. We actually go over the project pipeline on a regular basis and kind of look at any projects that are stuck and talk about anything we can do to kind of move them along. So what I'll do is I'll check in with them and provide you with an update that way, provide all the partners an update that way, because it is an excellent question. So thank you for that.
May I comment? Sorry, I'm in the car, so that's why I'm not on video. But as this survey process, to Steve's point, I think MHC 1.0 should have been able to ascertain what this was. And I understand the Funders Network is working on it. We've discussed it, but this seems like critical low-hanging fruit. And why do we need another survey to get the answers that, our regional agencies already know? I mean, it seems like we should, another month's gone by, another 2 months, another 3 months. Why can't we jump in and try and get some of these unstuck? So it seems like it should be a priority, and that's why I raised the question.
Right. And maybe what we need to do, Tom, is also kind of bring this more to a light in terms of a communication with our community and everyone, kind of bring it out of our housing funders a little bit better and kind of better bring light to the whole issue and kind of the data we do have on it, in addition to gathering more data on it and taking a closer look at it. So I will kind of bring that up with all of you on the network and can kind of take a closer look at it and then provide all the partners with an update on it.
So if we can't get that data, and we've gone through these processes, how does this survey address that, or how do we drill down on that? And I guess that's
Can I jump in on this and
sure.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I'm looking at the housing tracker right now, but we actually do have the data of the projects themselves. And as we've kind of gone through, so I don't know if I can share, but I can show you. And I think that it's a worthy conversation that the housing funders have had to try and figure out, is it money? Is it, what are the barriers? And so maybe, Tara, what the question is can we take the data of the stuck projects, because we have that, and can we start to categorize those in specific kind of categories and bring it back to the council so that we can start to kind of actively think through that? And because we do have a lot of that information. And I'm kind of looking at Shauna here to jump in on that, because she and I spent a lot of time in 1.0 really trying to get our arms, Thomas, around that piece.
Yeah, I agree, Stacy. I think the tracker, we could just add a section of notes to each of those categories of the projects that are basically, we call them on hold instead of stuck. And every single one is completely different. It's litigation, it's funding, they're waiting for some other piece of the puzzle to fall in place. So I think just to inform everybody, calling each of those projects and finding out where they're at and why, and reintroducing ourselves, because we haven't done that in a while.
I agree.
Yeah, there they are.
I would love that information too, to make sure that we're, to the extent that there are themes, that we're addressing those in the processes.
Yeah, I mean, some of them, like I'm just looking at Mother's Nature, that was a project 3 years ago, and I think they might have sold. And I mean, we just need to go back.
But to kind of get to Tom's question, I think he's asking if the survey is going to have any impact on this. And I think maybe the developer inquiry form might actually be more of an area where we gather information about, any projects that are stuck and why they're stuck. I don't think the survey is going to actually gather information about that. The survey is really more about needs, housing needs.
Right.
Yeah, wires got crossed in this communication. The survey does not focus on these stuck projects. These stuck projects have been tracked per 1.0, and it is time for us to go back to each of those developments and get an update. So I think we've got an action item to take away from here.
Right. But Tom, I do hope we continue to gather more information, new information that we don't have as well, through the developer inquiry form as well, both by doing individual outreach and getting information through that developer inquiry form, I hope.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah. All right, guys. Well, we are a little bit ahead of schedule. Does anybody else have any more questions for economic and planning systems?
Let's not let, Tara, if you could do one more plug for the survey. I kind of just did it, but let's make sure that those are sort of some parting remarks. Please use all tools at your disposal to get word out about
Can we make it interactive? Can we ask everybody who has actively promoted the survey to put a thumbs up in their little reactions? And let's see if everybody's doing their Mountain Housing Council partner lift. Excellent. Hardy, Jen, Sean, thank you. Heidi, Monica, Amanda, Brittany, Teresa, this is good stuff. Christy, those are our networks. Fred, excellent. So this is the power of this collaboration, right? Is we can reach our community if we're all showing up and carrying the message forward. So thank you for that effort. What is the deadline on the survey? Let's remind everybody. May 7th. And I think we had 1,100, Emily, I'm looking at you. I think we had 1,100 respondents in 2016. We think it'd be really cool to double that. We were actually getting a lot of accolades for how many respondents we got in 2016. So we think we can knock it out of the ballpark here. And the team is thinking creatively, if we get to a place about a week ahead, that we really need to, put incentives out there to get people. But this is so important to all of us. We shouldn't have to put incentives out there. We should really, everybody should be able to take 10 minutes to complete this. And so there is a toolkit. You have all the information you need to share it in maybe your paychecks, put them in the envelopes, put it on your social media. We've created the ads for you in English and Spanish. Like, it is an easy lift. I think in your head space, it's maybe 7 minutes of your time to get it out to your network. So thank you for letting me take that time. And we could put that information up during the break. We could actually, put that screen up during the break for you.
Yeah, great. Thank you, Stacy. And I saw there was a question about where we are at with the number of responses. The last that I heard was 39 employers and 319 employees, and that was as of 4/21. Yeah. So, well,
just one last thing to update on. I just got an email from one of the participants in the stakeholder working group, and I just want to ensure people that although the timeline for the project stretched out a little. We will be getting an invite out for our first stakeholder working group meeting shortly. We wanted to make sure that we had data to actually anchor the meeting in, and the survey and the preliminary data from the regional housing needs assessment needed to be close to ready before we could set that meeting. But we will set that meeting now, and all of you that have confirmed your participation can expect an invite shortly.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Anyone else before we take a break? Awesome. Okay, well, looks like you guys have about 9 minutes for your break. We're not doing breakout sessions this particular quarterly meeting because we have such a packed agenda. But Christina's also going to put up a question that we just kind of thought we'd put out there as kind of a community engagement question about employer-led housing solutions and what you all think about them. We probably won't have time to discuss the answers. So what she's going to do is when she circulates the quarterly meeting material, she's going to circulate a poll. Completely optional, but just something if you want to weigh in on, you'll have the option of doing. So thanks very much, everyone, and I'll see you back at 10.
Thank you.
All right, I'm going to give folks one more minute. All right, everyone, welcome back. I'm going to turn things over to Stacy to talk about a topic that was integral to Mountain Housing Council and continues to come up in our work to provide housing solutions for local workers at a variety of income levels, and that is the definition of achievable local housing. So, Stacy, do you want to go ahead and talk about that?
Sure. Yeah, I think this is just a good touch base moment for Mountain Housing Council and our partners to, we often reference this bridge because we want to show when we talk about achievable local, we're talking about a spectrum of economic demographics in our community. HUD defines affordable, or sometimes people will say capital A affordable. That's a federal kind of term that indicates a level of state and federal subsidy. So, these affordable units can go after tax credits and grants at the public level, state and federal public grants. And so that's that orange section in the bridge. And when we came together as Mountain Housing Council, the very first meeting, somebody said, well, you can't really call it affordable, you need to call it workforce housing. And then somebody was like, well, how do we define workforce housing? And we quickly realized that a lot of people had a lot of different terms, and those terms are relevant for sure. But we wanted to kind of ask ourselves as a Mountain Housing Council, what are we focused on? What kind of housing are we focused on? Are we focused on the capital A affordable, or do we need to go beyond that? And by the way, beyond that orange area, there's really no state and federal funding for that. So that's why we continue to be really challenged to get diverse inventory, because there's no subsidies for that type of housing. And in 2016, the Housing Needs Assessment told us that not only do we need affordable housing, but we also need housing for our middle and upper middle income earners, because even those individuals, as we see on a weekly basis, can't afford to live here. And so the very first policy paper that Mountain Housing Council worked on and released to the community was this collective definition of what we're focused on, and we called it achievable. Sometimes I hear some of you reference the blue and the red as that's the achievable versus the orange is affordable. But really, in our true definition of achievable, everything from, the low income all the way up to the upper middle income is under that definition of achievable. That's what we're focused on in Mountain Housing Council. When you look at the tracker, those colors and those categories are being tracked so we can make sure we're not overbuilding a certain type of housing, right? And that we're spreading it across. And so you see in the updated needs assessment numbers, we're trying to spread it across, because we also know that with diversity of inventory, like if we are building upper middle class housing, people have more choices and they tend to find the right type of housing for themselves. When you don't have enough diversity of housing, you've got kind of a wrong fit, mismatched choices that are happening in housing. So you have 5 young professionals living in a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house that actually a family of 5 might prefer. And those 5 working professionals actually might not want to be always having roommates, into their mid-30s. And so, if we build that diversity, then people can find their way to the right type of housing for where they are in their life and what they can afford. So that was the thinking behind Achievable. we have kind of discovered a few things over the last 3.5, 4 years, walking around with Achievable. Number one, we have noticed that for the jurisdictions to adopt that broader definition, it's not so easy, and we haven't really seen kind of clear adoption tying planning and programs and policies to that. But then in some ways we have. So I think TRPA right out of the gate adopted it. They actually adopted a higher income level. I think we set our top at 195. I think they went to 205. And we kind of celebrated that. We thought, this is really great. If across the region we can align the definitions, the programs and policies, then we can create more momentum there. Even if we recognize that some want to go even beyond the 195%. We thought that was pretty cool. So I wanted to put this conversation on the table almost as, does this still work for us? Do we need to reaffirm it? Are there some tweaks? Are there some barriers to this that just don't work for us? I think it's a little bit different with the jurisdictions because they're also having to align with their housing elements and that they have to report to the state. And so there might be challenges at that level. So maybe we don't worry so much about their adoption of it, but as a community, we stay focused on this concept of Achievable. Or are there limitations at the community level? I guess I just wanted to take a moment because recently in the TRPA housing working group, there was also a conversation about, is Achievable working for us? And so I felt like that was a good opportunity to just have a conversation about is it working, is it not, and how we can be helpful. And I would like to invite Karen. I know that we gave you a heads up on this conversation, and I think maybe even Emily Setzer, just because I think that's helpful. That is purely the jurisdiction's kind of views. But I would also then encourage people like John Falk or others who are kind of at that community level or that advocacy level to weigh in on it as well. So let's start with Karen and Emily if they have any input here, and then maybe John if you have something, and then open it up.
Great. I don't know, maybe Emily should start and then we can chime in. And Alyssa Bettinger is here from TRPA too, and she worked on developing the initial Achievable definition. So I might let her kind of explain our experience with it.
Sure, I can provide some insight. I know we've had a lot of conversations between just using the income level or requiring local worker verification. And I think what seems to have come up recently, especially with the influx of the Zoomtown employees, is that local worker verification seems more critical in a lot of the conversations and just from what I'm seeing in the community. That said, our board has, at least for certain projects, expressed interest at putting an income cap on certain things. We have an income cap on our Hopkins Village project in Martis Valley. We have an income cap. That one's at 180. We have an income cap using our TRPA achievable income limits right now with our workforce housing preservation program, which we're expecting to launch this summer. I think if TRPA changes those, we'll probably just use the same limits, those same income limits for our program because our board had requested that. But I think it does seem very critical right now to have the local worker restrictions and requiring that verification that they do work locally at an employment site. But I'm curious to hear what other people think. Maybe it's a combination of both. Maybe it's only moving to local worker. Maybe there could be some options.
And I want to punt to Alyssa, but I also just want to say, in the solution, if there is a solution we're creating, achievable housing that term is a deep investment in branding with Mountain Housing Council and community awareness. And so in my mind, I'm like, do we abandon achievable, or can we build in an additional element to what achievable is that isn't just income restricted? But anyway, Alyssa, please jump in.
Yeah, thank you. I would echo what Emily said. Right now our achievable definitions are purely income based. So we are, as Emily mentioned, kind of running up against this issue, or I guess could be perceived issue that our achievable housing could potentially be going to workers who, are within the income limits, but don't actually work in Tahoe. We've also found that, and Stacey, as you mentioned before, so TRPA a couple of years ago during our development rights initiative adopted the achievable income levels, and those levels are different based on the county that you're in. And we used the Mountain Housing Council methodology at the time, and so it looked at what was the income needed to afford the median home price. And we're finding that the income, or the achievable percentages, especially in like more expensive counties like Washoe County, are really, really high. They're like it's above 400%, just using that basic methodology. And so we're kind of grappling with how do we come up with a methodology that's somewhat consistent for all the counties in the basin, but also is actually subsidizing the income group that we want to subsidize, because 400%, is pretty high, probably higher than the level that we actually want to subsidize. So we've been sort of coming up with some different ideas for how to deal with that. And one would be moving towards more of a location-based deed restriction. So you would have to be working within like the Tahoe Basin boundary or the Truckee Tahoe Unified School District, or potentially a combination of both. We don't have, we're not moving forward with a formal recommendation at the moment, but we have discussed this in past meetings.
Great. John, do you want to go ahead with your comments, and then we'll go to Shauna?
Thanks. The TRPA Housing Working Group that I serve on as well has been, I think, invaluable in kind of fleshing out some of these issues, especially as it relates to the diversity of people that oftentimes aren't considered. We focus so heavily on one segment of the community that needs to be housed, as I've mentioned today. But we also have people that have lived up here for a few years that want to stay up here when they retire, and they don't want to be forced out, because of the way housing costs are going and such. And so there's also the retirees, there's the veteran, the disabled. There's a whole range of people that need to be housed and should be included under that umbrella. But the issue that I really wanted to drive home is, one, I wanted to reaffirm that up to 195% AMI at least needs to be retained as the achievable income level. It's hypercritical, but equally important, and it was also mentioned in the one-page policy blurb that's been printed out from the original group that developed the policy. It's the fact that there's no state and federal monies available to augment or support or push forward these projects. And so in addition to supporting policies that create achievable housing opportunities, we have, again, I come back to this over and over again, we have to go back to funding pools that are local in nature that then give us the flexibility to utilize them for achievable housing where there are no state or federal monies to be had. Thank you.
Shauna, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah. So I think the town is currently not using that. We probably will in the near future, but I guess I would just say that all of us, even if we're not using that word, are using it as a framework for our work. And then the second thing is I updated the tracker because I think that it's important that we focus on either the deed restriction piece or the development agreement. I mean, at the end of the day, it doesn't count as achievable local housing unless we have something in place that assures us it will be used for the intended use. So I think what we're getting at is, do we want those deed restrictions and those development agreements to be focused on AMI, or is it more focused on occupancy being restricted to somebody who's employed within the school district? So it's really down to what is the language that we want in those protections. And I just wanted to remind everyone that, you know, a word is a word, but at the end of the day, where is the power in the word? And the power in the word is in those deed, you know, how we describe things in the deed restrictions and the development agreements. So a developer comes and says, you know, I want to build, I know we have a housing need and I want to build housing. And the question is, what kind of housing, and are you willing to restrict it in some way for the intended use? And I think that's critical. I am also seeing, I agree with what is being said. We do a lot of different programs at the town, and each program it's hard to, they're all different and they all need to work. You need flexibility within that AMI, and I think moving, you know, some programs I think we should protect for lower incomes, and some are going to make more sense to make it an occupancy. But I think we have to be cautious about across the board making every program one way.
Mm-hmm.
So
I'm going to jump in here. Thank you, Shauna, and John and Emily and Karen and Alyssa. This is helpful. And it appears to me that we do need to help put some additional definition to this. And I actually think this is super innovative. And I love that we're saying it's not just about what people make. We have to get, and I know this intuitively is what you guys, you know, deal with all the time, but I think for Mountain Housing Council to put a finer point on that definition, not only in the purpose of, and the, to your point, Shauna, like the deed restrictions, the restrictions or the ways, but also the target community stakeholder groups that John's bringing up. And so as an action item, so we can keep moving, staff will, I think, come up with some draft language and run it through this group of people who've weighed in on the topic and bring it back to the next quarterly meeting for an amendment to the policy paper. Does that seem like a good solution to this? Okay. And if there's others who really feel an opinion about it, reach out to Christina and we'll include you on the review of it. My only caution is we have a lot of brand equity in the achievable aspect of it. And we even have logos and all sorts of things coming out of this implementation plan. So if we don't adopt something radically different, but instead we get a finer point on what the definition is, that might be, but yet, you know, I like AHA, but I could probably go with ACHA too. So we'll figure it out, y'all. But thank you for taking the time to weigh in on this. And I just think it's really important. This is how real alignment happens in policy and programs. And funding, the third piece is the funding piece. And I think that also needs to be in the definition, to John's point. So, okay. Thanks, everybody.
I'm going to give Sean just 1 minute to weigh in because he's had his hand up before we move on to partner updates.
Yeah.
I think you're cutting out for some reason.
Let's see. Better, can you hear me?
A little bit. Maybe write it into the chat and we'll make sure we get it answered. Thanks, Sean. Sorry. Okay, let's go on to, we're right on time, right on to partner updates. Does anyone want to start? hope the microphone's working okay.
I can hear you, Tara.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually, Emily Vitus just raised her hand. So
great.
Emily, do you want to get started?
I would love to. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, awesome. Emily Vitus, Executive Director of the Truckee Tahoe Workforce Housing Agency, and today's conversation resonates with me, as we talk with employees that are losing their housing due to displacement. And my board this week asked that we elevate the conversation around temporary housing solutions for our employees. Our member agencies have land. What can we do in, the few years that we're looking to develop workforce housing to provide temporary housing on that land for our employees? As soon as we start to hear that we have teachers living out of their cars, we realize that we really need to move quickly on this. And so if there are members here on the call that are interested in having a conversation on the temporary housing solution piece, I'd love to connect, and we will be connecting with a couple of different providers. The presentation today was really interesting on Boxable, so we'll be looking into this and see what we can do as quickly as possible. On the housing agency progress front, we are celebrating 1 year in operation. It's been an exciting year. It's interesting that we founded the same week that the world went into shutdown due to COVID-19. So there's been some challenges that we did not perceive, but it has still been a year of progress and growth for us. We have helped 80 employees on their housing journeys. So some of that is kind of providing hand-holding to understand what the, this is my AMI, or this is how much I make, what can I afford, what can I look for, what kind of housing is there for the 80% less. Some of it is actually getting employees into houses. So we've celebrated 10 employees and their families getting into houses over the last 9 months since we started our housing-related activities. We have another 5 that are hopefully going to be purchasing houses at Hopkins Village, with that opportunity coming available hopefully this summer in regards to actually being able to commit to purchasing. Other than that, looking at workforce housing development, of course, and we're finishing up a land mapping exercise right now to understand which of our member agency owned parcels could potentially be developed on. We're working on building out a master leasing program right now, hopefully to go live this summer or fall, talking with developers about what is in the pipeline for them, what projects are coming available that we may be able to master lease large blocks of units from. We're also talking with the town, Placer County and Nevada County, about bringing them on as member agencies of the Workforce Housing Agency. My board will be taking action on that in May. And finally, the temporary housing piece. That's the thing that I'm really focused on right now, seeing what existing land our member agencies have, we may be able to provide some temporary housing solutions on. And that is it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Emily. Okay, next on to Chase.
Hi, thanks. I'll just give one very brief update. As you all know, we did a needs assessment and action plan on the South Shore. And then combined with all the brilliant work that MHC is doing on the North Shore, we've just started a new project with Incline Village and Crystal Bay, which will complete, I think, all of the recent data updates and either action plans or strategy directives for the basin. The press release was just submitted this week, so I'm sure you'll start hearing more about this. Very early stages, but happy to complete that study around the basin. And that's all I've got for now.
Awesome. Thanks, Chase. Emily Setzer.
Right. As I know, we've mentioned Hopkins Village on here already, but that is a 40-unit for sale housing project in Martis Valley. They're being sold right now for a starting price of $550,000 with a 180% income cap for the household and the local worker deed restriction. We've had 24 qualified buyers so far. We've been getting about 1 application per week. So if you know people who are interested in purchase opportunities, please share that with them. Also, right across the street in Martis Valley is Meadowview Place. That is a 56 affordable unit development, and that'll be constructed and should be available for rent this fall, winter. So really excited about that. And then over in Tahoe City for Dollar Creek Crossing, As most of you know, the county kind of hit the pause button and reset that project. And we've been doing some feasibility and background studies on the site. And we are about to get a consultant, or beginning the process to get a consultant hired to do the environmental review. That project will require an EIR. So we should have that kicked off soon. And then I know I mentioned our workforce housing preservation program. That's the program modeled after Vail's Indeed program. We have $500,000 to start that program this year, hoping to launch that by sometime this summer. We're working on the logistics for that, getting the administration side set up. That's funded with general fund and TOT. We do have an interest list on our website where people can sign up for that. I admit it might be challenging during these times of almost 50% cash offers is what I heard from the Sierra Board of Realtors for the last 6 months in our area. So, this might be a challenging time to start the program, but I think it's an awesome program. We also expect a package of countywide housing code amendments to go to our board for approval in July. Those include things like cluster housing, tiny houses, and tiny house communities. Those will not apply in the basin because we have our Tahoe Basin Area Plan with TRPA, but we're working with them on a lot of other progressive things. And then the Placer County housing element update is going to our board for approval on May 11th. And then I'll end with some ADU stats. For East Placer, we've had 1 permit application in just this year. And then we have 3 ADU appointments for East Placer sites. Overall, countywide, we've seen a huge uptick in ADU applications. So we're hoping that with some recent code changes we made to our area plan and future changes we're talking about with TRPA, we're hoping to get a lot more ADUs built in East Placer as well as countywide. We also have some pre-approved ADU construction plans and an ADU website. And we have an ADU guru on staff. So if anyone's interested in building one or hears someone interested in building one in Placer County, Megan, our ADU guru, can meet with them and walk them through the process. That's it.
Awesome. Thanks, Emily.
I have to jump in just because we just had some breaking data that just came through on the ADUs with the ADUs. So this week we actually released our standard plans. We just released them on, let's say Monday or Tuesday is when they officially went live. In that time, we've already had 48 people download them and 1 application in. So that's how fast those are moving. So I just had to let everybody know that. I'm as shocked as anybody that they went that quickly. But I think we did have a little bit of a pent up demand for them. So, but hopefully, we'll be able to start seeing some of these applications also on the east side. That was it.
Great. Thanks, Shauna. On to you, Teresa.
Thank you. So we continue to be focused on assisting those who have housing to retain it as much as possible, specifically renters. And so to that end, we have, in partnership with TDPUD and Southwest Gas, delivered $165,000 in utility credits to looks like about 400 families, and then done rental assistance in the amount of $515,000. So these numbers are kind of since COVID, so since March 2020 numbers, so annual at this point. And then also kind of shifted gears in March to assisting folks who qualify to apply for Rent Help Placer or Housing is Key funding, which, as I'm sure you know, also includes relief directed to landlords for arrears that might be owed. So far, all of the folks who have come to us do qualify for those programs. So while we do still have funding to provide directly from us for those who don't qualify, we haven't seen any of those folks yet. So certainly refer folks our way, either way, no matter if they you think they qualify for those programs or not, and we can try to help them out. And then we've hired a new homeless outreach coordinator who works closely with Kathy and her team on providing case management for community members who are experiencing homelessness, with an emphasis on access to vaccines as well as housing. So that's my quick update. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Teresa. Sean.
Yeah, thanks for the graphic help. What's that?
That's Christina. On to Sean.
All right, I'm going to try again. Can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, thanks. Just one quick update from the Tahoe City PUD. We've had a few new board members join our board of directors, and our board recently reaffirmed their support and commitment to the Mountain Housing Council. So happy to have had that conversation with our board and get their continuing support. And then just the comment I was going to make earlier is as a longtime member of this group and one who worked through the challenges of coming up with the term achievable local housing, I would advocate we don't change it. For some of the reasons that Stacy stated, we've made a lot of traction. It has taken hold and it has conveyed what we were trying to get it to convey, I think. And so I would just not advocate taking this group's resources to rebrand our efforts and instead focus on I do agree with, adding some clarity around it. And I would say as an employer and a member of this group, as a local employer and then both as an agency who would be able to respond when jurisdictions are making determinations about the types of projects that qualify, that as an employer, it would be important to us that both the income levels are being monitored and are part of that qualification, and that also folks working in the community for local employers is part. So I appreciate the jurisdictions weighing how that has changed because both would be important to us in any type of action that we would take to follow along and offer incentives based on determinations by the jurisdictions.
Great. Wonderful. Thank you, Sean. Did anyone else have their hand up? John Falk. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, sorry. Tahoe Sierra Board of Realtors, as any of you that are on the Legislative Policy Committee know, are deep in the weeds with one of the most aggressive housing policy-driven legislative sessions I've ever seen in the state legislature. It's both exciting and absolutely scary, because there are pieces of legislation that we are standing behind and supporting, and there are pieces of legislation like SB 12 that we found wholly offensive and contrary to all of our interests. But with that said, I think that the one point that a lot of the housing bills that we've been discussing have been revolving around that apply locally, that TSBR has been working on for the better part of 72 months plus, is the structural fire insurance and the lack of availability and affordability of it, or the lack of ability to retain a policy once it comes due for renewal. And so there's a co-track to this whole concept of wildfire prevention, and that's the concept of you getting a mortgage, and you're not going to get a mortgage back if you can't get that insurance. And we've been working with 2 insurance commissioners at the state level to date, starting with Dave Jones, to ensure that we get some levers put in place to keep this process active. And I'm hoping that we can get Mountain Housing Council more involved in this as we flesh out our proposal. And then in the specific, the Tahoe Sierra Board of Realtors is meeting with the California Association of Realtors over the next 2 weeks, our state level partner, to discuss the legislative policies and proposals for the upcoming session that aren't already decided. And I am asking our local government group at the state level to offer, say, 20 to 45 minutes time at the next quarterly meeting, not the one in the next 2 days at Sacramento, but the next quarterly meeting, to actually come and have the Mountain Housing Council present to the entire CAR group, the leadership team, like 1,200 people that'll be there, what we do, how we're doing it, how we brought together the public-private partnerships in unique ways and are finding common ground. And so expect that formal invitation to come soon, and hopefully we'll be able to shake out who's going to represent this organization. Thank you.
John, if you wouldn't mind putting that maybe in an email to me if you have a minute, just so I make sure I discuss it with our statewide policy and legislative group, that would be really helpful. Thank you. All right, on to Karen.
Thanks. Yeah, I have a few updates. So TRPA's housing working group, which is a committee of our advisory planning committee, and quite a few people in this group I know either sit on the committee or attend. We met last month, and that group recommended moving a couple of near-term proposals forward to our governing board that would just kind of take an initial cut at making it easier to do some workforce housing types in the near term. And then we're going to take some more time to look more in depth at some other issues. But the two main ones related to allowing accessory dwelling units on parcels of less than 1 acre, because right now they're limited to 1 acre basin wide. And then the other one is to allow non-conforming tourist densities to be converted to residential units. So that was, we're finding a barrier that we have a lot of older motels that were envisioned to be potentially prime candidates for redevelopment to residential units, but because the residential densities are lower than the allowable tourist densities, we weren't seeing that happen. So that's another change that the working group recommended moving forward. And now at staff level, we're doing the environmental analysis before we take it forward to our governing board. So once that's completed, we'll start moving that forward. And then after that, the next issue that's kind of emerging that Alyssa is the lead on is I think kind of a summary of it is just really starting to look at kind of like, as Blake was mentioning, like how do we tie incentives more to size than just like this flat, everything, units are all the same, you know? So we're going to be looking at how we can do that in a variety of areas, you know, fees, density, and other incentives that we have built into our code. So we'll be starting to look at that probably late summer or fall. And then just to build onto the ADU discussion that Emily mentioned, TRPA is currently doing the permits for ADUs for Placer County because of some of the inconsistencies with California law and TRPA regulations. But since Placer County passed their the amendments to the Placer County area plan, we've actually seen, which went through in February, I think, we've had 6 applications for ADUs come in. So we're starting to see applications in the Tahoe Basin too, which is great because we weren't getting those before in the Tahoe Basin part of Placer County. And then, oh, just the last thing is this month at governing board, our governing board is going to be reviewing for approval the regional transportation plan, and also looking at a modification to our vehicle miles traveled threshold, which and also an initial way that we do our air quality mitigation fees, and all of those really tie into the housing discussion as well, because they again get at kind of being more supportive of workforce housing and recognizing that they have, you know, fewer environmental impacts, particularly when they're closer to transit and town centers. So that's going to be going forward this month as well. And I think that's everything.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. Did anyone else want to give an update or ask a question?
We can give an update from the town.
Great. Thanks, Jen.
Yep. Just pull up my paper here. So a lot going on, and we're expanding our capacity to respond to housing needs, and part of that is with our Measure K money that was recently approved, and we've included that in our budget for 2021. We're expecting $700,000 a year, and we've programmed that out in combination with grants and in lieu fees and general fund money for the next 5 years. And part of that is we're adding staffing to help with the demand out there. So we have Jamie Lachance, who's our current planner with the town, and she's part-time. She's going to be dedicated to spending her time on ADUs. It's about half a full-time position. We're hiring a new planner position, and half of that new position will also be dedicated to housing, specifically working with Shauna and the rest of the team on housing-related topics. And we were very fortunate to get approved for a Civic Sparks Fellow. So we'll be interviewing applicants, and they will be coming on board in September. So we'll have a Civic Sparks Fellow for housing and one for our KTG team, which does our sustainability and solid waste programs. So we're looking forward to that. We've also done an employee housing survey. Wendy helped us do that. It's very similar to the survey that the JPA completed. We've sent that out. We have 136 employees, and we had a really good response rate. I think it was in the 80% range. So we've been going through the results of that and plan to come back to council in June with those results. There's a lot of interest, indeed, restricted for sale housing. And it really highlighted the importance of housing security as it relates to retention of our employees. So definitely something that we're keeping an eye on and looking at. Councilmember Romack had to jump off, so I'm going to give her update. The council adopted their new council priorities and work plan at the end of March, and one of their priorities continues to be focused on supporting the development of workforce housing. We might end up changing that terminology depending on what we decide from here, but that's how it currently reads. As part of the adoption of the council priorities, we have developed a really elaborate and aggressive work plan. There's five priorities in total, so 4 others, and each of the priorities has a number of different goals to move those priorities forward, and they all kind of intertwine with each other. We have a priority to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and climate change, which of course is connected to housing and having local housing, and enhance our communication and public outreach and community cohesion, invest in infrastructure for connectivity, as well as emergency preparedness, including wildfires. So a lot of interconnectivity that we think we can link housing programs with those other council priorities and programs to move those forward. And then we have, we're excited to bring the data from the housing needs assessment to the town's housing work plan, and intertwining those as well. And let's see, Shauna or Yumi, you want to go next? Shauna, you want to go next?
I can jump in, and then I'll pass it over to Shauna to take it away. The town of Truckee has a number of planning projects that are underway, as we are all aware. The general plan update is continuing, and we're expecting a community workshop in late June, early July to get community feedback on land use alternatives. So looking at potential options for housing in different areas of our town. We also have the Innovate Gateway planning process that's happening, and that we are anticipating another workshop for that one, our 3rd workshop in mid-June. So there's a lot of activity happening at the town right now. A lot of what's happening in the Innovate Gateways, we're seeing that our community has an appetite for obviously workforce housing in that area, and then looking at mixed use opportunities on that corridor. And then we are also looking at taking our SB2 process to our town council for review and some direction in late May. So that's the process where we're looking at potential rezones of different sites for additional housing. And then we are moving forward with a LEAP grant, which is a funding grant from HCD to look at developing objective design standards for multifamily housing. So if we create objective design standards, then it gives developers a clearer path for what's expected for housing projects. So that's the intent, is that it will streamline these types of projects to meet both our community goals for aesthetics as well as our goals for more housing within our region. So that's a few planning projects we're working on now, and I'll turn it over to Shauna.
Okay, thanks everyone. So I just wanted to start with just a little bit of a story. One of the deed restricted for sale units that's in the town's inventory came up a couple of weeks ago. The owner was selling, and what was exciting, and it now is under contract with an employee at the airport. And what was exciting is, I think in the past, the word deed restriction on a for sale product was pretty challenging for a realtor. People weren't ready. They didn't really like deed restrictions. They didn't really understand what AMI levels were. And the realtor had 30 applicants that met the 120 AMI requirement and were ready to go and understood sort of pre-qualification. And it's just a huge shift in our community's understanding. I know it's also because our market is more challenging, but we've had for sale deed restricted units in the past that we never really, they weren't very popular here. And now I think the timing is right for that kind of product to be something that's palatable for our community. So that was exciting. And that unit went very quickly to another local employee. Our ADU program, again, we're a year in. Just as a reminder, it's a 3-pronged program. So we have lots of information on our website, including a new thing, which is an ADU vendor list. So one of the questions we keep getting is, I really want to build an ADU, but I don't know, who do I call for a survey? Who do I call for an energy consult? Who do I call as a contractor? And we now have a list up there of people that you can call. And I've talked to several of those vendors, and they're getting lots of calls. So the goal of sort of bolstering our market to respond is starting to happen. We have a technical assistance team. So we have an ADU and team in place. So any call that comes into the town about an ADU comes to me first, and I answer as much as I can. And then when they're ready to have sort of a pre-permit feasibility check with our planner, they go to Jamie. And then we have a building technician involved to help with permitting. And that seems to be working really well. We have our goal is 25 permits per year. And in Q1, we have 9 in the queue. So lots of after the fact. So those are existing ADU, people that have existing unpermitted, technically non-compliant ADUs that are coming in as a result of them not being able to get short-term rental permits, certificates. And so that's been an interesting thing where someone goes to our short-term rental department, tries to get their unit registered, find out that it's not legal. It gets sent over to me. I start them in the process of bringing their unit into compliance. They cannot go back and short-term rent, but once their unit is permitted, they can apply for a $3,000 grant through our long-term rental grant program. And we've had 3 of those so far. Long-term rental grant program, working in partnership with Landing Locals. We have 11 homes that have been unlocked in our existing housing stock for those who are geographically employed. So it's a employer qualification up to 120% AMI. We are looking to potentially expand where there's several. We're finding that there's several kind of employees that we're not able to serve because of the AMI levels at that cap. So we are looking at potentially going back to council in a month and expanding that offering up to 150. State-owned parcel, the old CHP site over on the corner of 89 and Donner Pass Road is currently in the planning stage. It has a name. It's called Pacific Crest Commons, and it is being developed by the Pacific Group, who did Freshman 2 and Hennis Flats, so a known NAD and a great team to work with there. Don't have the date yet, but we're super excited, and we might need to join forces with Placer County on a big housing. Instead of doing individual ribbon cuttings for all of the affordable housing that's opening this fall, so 180 units in Truckee, and then you count Placers, and we're well over 200. So we're going to do a festival, basically, a ribbon cutting day, and it's probably going to include public transportation, going to the different sites, ending at downtown Truckee with food trucks and booths and celebrating housing and serving our community. So mid-October is what we're thinking, and we're excited. Also, last thing is working with Sierra Community House, a $37,000 grant to expand beyond the state emergency rental assistance to serve those who are coming in with needs beyond the 80% AMI. And that's it.
Oh, that's really exciting, Shauna. Thank you. Positive news. Sarah.
Thank you. I'm Sarah Monson with the Truckee North Tahoe, TMA. And just wanted to share that we will be putting the Mountain Council survey information on the TART buses. That will either happen today or Monday, hopefully. And also let you know that we have lots of really exciting transportation programs that will be starting this summer or piloting this summer. Not a ton of information about them now, but it should be a lot easier for people to leave their cars and travel around our area this summer. So that's it for now. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Sarah. Okay, and Brett.
Hi, everyone. Real quickly, Shauna, I heard your point about some problems with the deed restriction and navigating that issue with realtors. One thing that I would consider is we were just talking about what the words basically translate to, and to me, it's really a buyer assistance program. I think when you start using deed restriction, it points out all the negatives of the program, and I think buyer assistance might be a easier way to gain some traction. But real quickly, with the North Lake Tahoe Resort Association officially passed the TBID, which is a tourist business improvement district. Simply put, is the local businesses, including restaurants, retail, and lodging, have assessed themselves in order to pay for programs, including, in this case, with this group, is housing and transportation. So we're currently looking at least our goal is, based on previous numbers, is $4 million a year will be collected and be put towards housing and transportation. So more of that to follow, but businesses will start collecting that assessment as of July 1st, and with the help of Placer County and the Board of Supervisors and the businesses here in the area, we're really encouraged about where we're going to be going forward. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Brett. I'm going to have any other partners who want to give updates. Just go ahead and fill out the updates on the website or send them to Christina, and we'll make sure that they get shared so that we can go on to public comment. Just to keep in mind, we do have some guidelines sorry, Allison, did you have one more thing you wanted to share?
Can I just make a comment?
Yeah.
It's really interesting listening to everyone's updates. And I think what strikes me about it is I feel like, as director of the collaborative, I spend a lot of time in meetings talking about community needs, and I know that we all do. So I'm just in these very challenging conversations around childcare and behavioral health, and housing always comes up. And I think what strikes me is those are some of the most hopeful updates I've heard in any of the areas that we care about as a collaborative in a really long time. And I just wonder if there's a way that we can kind of share that with the broader community.
Right.
And I know that you all we do such a good job with the meeting summaries and the communications, but those are really strong messages of hope in a time that people are really, really concerned about the fabric of our community. So just wondering if there's a way as champions of the Mountain Housing Council and as members, we can be better stewards of all the good things that are happening, because it's really encouraging to hear.
And Allison, this is something I'm hearing from every single partner, which is that we have to do more on outreach and reaching more people and getting the word out to people, because things are dismal. The news seems to only cover kind of the dismal housing crisis news. And so I'm really hoping that that's what we can focus on, is more community engagement, better outreach to groups that perhaps haven't been reached as well, and kind of get the good news out as well as all of the opportunities as well. That's kind of a gap I think we really need to bridge, and I'm hoping our consultant group helps us with that as well. They're very good at that, but I think that's a really good point. Okay, I'm going to open things up to public comment. Christina, if you wouldn't mind putting up the guidelines, just to kind of keep in mind that we have guidelines about time and respecting everyone's opinion, and just kind of provide an opportunity for public comment. Does anyone have any comments? Okay. Great. Well, with that, I'm going to go ahead and just thank you guys all for joining us today and for being patient with me, as it being my first quarterly meeting that I've tried to facilitate. So thanks very much. I kind of want to put a plug in again for that April 28th meeting on Wednesday for the supportive housing and homelessness group. and also really encourage you guys to fill out the feedback survey on these meetings, because we really need to know how we're doing, and kind of anything else that we should be doing to help you. You can certainly put other information outside of the quarterly meetings on anything we can do to help and improve, to please do that. And always, of course, please provide your updates as often as you can so that we can get it on Facebook, so that we can grow our Facebook page, so that we can reach more people. It's all kind of a circle that comes back to itself. Yeah, does anybody else have any closing things they wanted to say? All right, great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And we will make sure we circulate all of the Q&A and all the answers for any questions that came up. Thank you so much.